Hello, my name is Mason Ashford, 26 years old. I'm a freelance designer living in a small apartment in the heart of Madison, Wisconsin. A place where cobblestone streets and vibrant red maple trees every fall make me feel like I'm living inside a painting. Madison is a city of shimmering lakes, misty mornings, and street corners fragrant with the smell of roasted coffee. But if you ask me, what makes Madison special isn't the scenery, it's the memories. Memories of a once close-knit family gathering around the dinner table every Thanksgiving, laughing and sharing stories that never grow old. Now those are just fragments I try to piece together, knowing full well that some things have changed forever. I grew up in Janesville, a small town about an hour's drive from Madison. As a kid, I loved the peaceful atmosphere of Janesville, the white wooden houses, the endless fields of barley, and the church bells ringing every Sunday morning. My parents, Greg and my biological mother, were once the couple everyone in town admired. My dad was a tall man with a warm, deep voice, always telling stories about his days working as a mechanic at the local garage. My mom was gentle, with golden blonde hair and a smile that lit up the kitchen whenever she baked. They were deeply in love, or at least I thought so. But when I was 10, everything fell apart. My mom left, leaving behind a short note on the kitchen table saying she needed a different life. I don't blame her, but I've never understood why she chose to leave me and Dad without ever looking back. From then on, Dad changed. He became quiet, sometimes irritable, and the evenings he spent alone with a beer in the living room became a familiar sight. I learned to take care of myself, riding my bike to school, doing my homework, and teaching myself not to let sadness creep in. But thankfully, I still had my grandparents, Marilyn and Henry Ashford, in Monroe, a rural town 2 hours' drive from Janesville. That was where I found the warmth of family, where every Thanksgiving I could return and feel like I still belonged somewhere. My grandfather Henry was a quiet, meticulous man who always wore a suit for every holiday. He had a habit of adjusting his tie in front of the mirror at least 3 times before leaving the house. And whenever I asked, he'd just give a toothless grin and say, "You've got to look proper, Mason. No one respects a sloppy man." He was a retired math teacher from the local high school, and even in retirement, he'd scribble equations on napkins whenever I asked him about my homework. My grandmother Marilyn was the complete opposite, warm, always beaming with a radiant smile and constantly busy in the kitchen. Her roasted chicken was unforgettable. Crispy skin, tender meat infused with the aroma of herbs, and a plate of sweet pumpkin pie that she'd always cut an extra slice of just for Mason. Those Thanksgivings at my grandparents' house were the happiest times. When the family gathered around the fireplace, laughter filled the air and all worries seemed to melt away. But things started to change when Dad remarried Darlene. Darlene came from another town with brassy blonde hair, a sharp voice, and an air of superiority in her eyes. She was nothing like my mom, not even close. Darlene liked to control everything, from how Dad organized the garage to how I tied my shoes when I visited. She always imposed her opinions, and what I hated most was the way she looked at my grandparents, as if they were backward farmers unworthy of her attention. They're just country folk, stuck in that backwater town their whole lives, knowing nothing but planting potatoes and raising chickens, she once said about them. Ever since Darlene came into the picture, our family tradition of gathering at my grandparents' house began to crack. She didn't want to drive 2 hours to Monroe. "It's too far, wastes gas, and their house is cramped and smells like the kitchen," she complained. Instead, she insisted my grandparents come to Janesville if they wanted to see me and Dad. I saw my grandfather quietly nod whenever she spoke, but the hurt in his eyes was unmistakable. My grandmother tried to keep the peace, always bringing a plate of pumpkin pie when she came, but I knew she was sad too. Thanksgivings were no longer the same. No more laughter by the fireplace, no more of Grandpa's stories about his youth, no more warmth of a family gathered together. This year, like the years before, Thanksgiving was held at Dad's house in Janesville, arranged by Darlene. I drove from Madison, eager to see my grandparents again after nearly a year apart. In my mind, I pictured Grandpa sitting there telling stories while adjusting the tie around his neck. Grandma would surely bring her pumpkin pie, the one I waited all year to have an extra slice of. I brought a bottle of wine and a small bouquet of white daisies, a gift I hoped would add warmth to the Thanksgiving atmosphere. The road from Madison to Janesville was unusually beautiful today, with pale sunlight filtering through the fiery red maples as if the whole world was welcoming a day of reunion. But when I pulled up to the house, something felt off. My grandparents' old pickup truck was nowhere to be seen. Instead, there were shiny new cars parked outside. I got out, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The first thing that hit me was the bright chandelier light and the loud festive music blaring from the living room. The smell of roasted turkey filled the air, but it wasn't Grandma's warm, herby aroma. It was a dry, unfamiliar scent laced with Darlene's strange spices. I scanned the room, expecting to see my grandparents' familiar faces. But they weren't there. Only Darlene's relatives, her parents, 2 cousins in flashy suits, and a few of her loud, laughing friends. Darlene, in a gaudy red dress, strutted back and forth, her high heels clacking on the wooden floor, directing everyone like a movie director. Dad sat in the corner, holding a can of beer, his eyes glued to the TV screen, playing a football game. I stood by the door, the bouquet in my hand, suddenly feeling out of place. The excitement I'd felt faded, replaced by an empty ache. Every year, Grandpa would arrive early, adjusting his tie and telling the same old jokes I'd heard 100 times but still laughed at. Grandma would be bustling in the kitchen, even though I knew she didn't like Darlene bossing her around. But today, they weren't here. No Grandpa grumbling about the weather, no smell of Grandma's pumpkin pie. Just unfamiliar faces and laughter I couldn't join in. I walked over to Dad, trying to keep my voice calm. "Dad, where are Grandma and Grandpa? Why aren't they here?" I waited for a reasonable answer, hoping he'd say they were on their way or just running late because of car trouble. But he looked up, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes, as if I'd asked something unnecessary. "They're busy. They couldn't come," he said curtly, then turned back to the TV as if it wasn't worth discussing further. "Busy?" I repeated, my voice faltering. My heart pounded, a lump forming in my throat. My grandparents had never missed a Thanksgiving, not even when it rained or snow blanketed the roads. I could still hear Grandma's excited voice over the phone a week ago, talking about Grandpa's new green tie. I was certain they wouldn't be too busy to miss this important Thanksgiving. I wanted to press further, but Darlene suddenly swooped in, placing a hand on my shoulder with a fake smile and a voice as sweet as sugar. "Mason, don't just stand there. Come try some pie. I worked on it all day." I nodded absently, but my mind was already far from this room. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I glanced at Darlene, a bad feeling creeping over me. Did she have something to do with this? Or was it Dad? I wanted to pull him aside and demand answers, but his cold gaze stopped me. Besides, Darlene's relatives were here, laughing loudly, and I didn't want to turn this into a scene in front of everyone. I sat down at the dining table, holding a glass of wine, trying to blend into the atmosphere, but my mind was in turmoil. Darlene's turkey was dry, nothing like Grandma's roasted chicken, the dish I'd been looking forward to all week. The conversations at the table revolved around Darlene's parents' jobs, her cousin's European vacation, and Darlene's excited plans to buy a new house, which she was discussing with Dad. I nodded along absent-mindedly, but all I wanted was to stand up, jump in my car, and drive straight to Monroe to check on my grandparents. Every time I glanced at Dad, hoping he'd look back and say something, anything, to ease the anxiety gripping my chest, he just took another sip of beer, eyes glued to the TV. Darlene, on the other hand, was overly animated, pouring wine for everyone and boasting with her stories. I sipped my wine, trying not to show my irritation, but with every passing minute, my unease grew. My grandparents were never busy on Thanksgiving. Never. I was about to stand up, using the excuse of getting more water, to step outside and call Grandma, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen. It was her number. My heart pounded as if someone had snatched my breath away. Grandma rarely called at this hour, especially on a holiday. A chilling premonition swept over me, cold as a November night's wind. I mumbled an apology to the person next to me, some cousin of Darlene's whose name I couldn't recall, and hurried to the hallway where the noise of the party faded, leaving only the distant hum of festive music. I pressed the answer button, trying to keep my voice calm. "Grandma, are you okay? Is everything all right?" But what came through was her gasping, trembling breath mixed with sobbing. "Mason. Grandpa. He's unconscious," she said, her voice breaking as if she was trying to hold it together but couldn't. I froze, feeling the floor beneath me collapse. "Grandma, calm down. Tell me what happened. Where did he fall? How is he now?" I asked, my voice shaking, my hand gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "On the stairs. Outside the porch," Grandma choked out. "The ambulance is on its way. Mason, can you come?" I don't know what to do." Her voice trailed off, blending with the sound of wind whistling through the phone as if she were standing outside in the cold. I immediately pictured their old wooden house in Monroe with the worn porch steps weathered by time. Grandpa fell there, unconscious. My heart pounded, my mind reeling with the worst possible images. "I'm coming right now, Grandma. Stay there. Don't go anywhere." I spoke quickly, almost shouting, then hung up without waiting for her response. I rushed back to the living room, my heart pounding like it might explode. The crowd was still laughing and talking loudly as if nothing had happened. I spotted Dad among them, still in the corner, beer can in hand, eyes fixed on the TV. "Dad," I called louder than I intended. "Grandpa fell. He's unconscious. I have to go to Monroe now. Come with me?" I was almost pleading, hoping he'd stand up, grab his coat, and rush out to the car with me. This was Grandpa, his father, the man who raised him, who loved us his whole life. Surely he'd come, right? But Dad just looked up, his eyes cold, as if I'd interrupted his favorite football game. "We're in the middle of a party, Mason," he said flatly. "Don't make a big deal out of it. He'll be fine." He took another sip of beer and turned back to the TV, as if Grandpa's collapse was just a minor inconvenience not worth his attention. I stood there, stunned, feeling like I'd been slapped across the face. "Dad, what did you just say?" I asked again, my voice faltering in disbelief. But he didn't respond, just shook his head slightly as if telling me to shut up and leave. Darlene, standing a few steps away, turned to me with her fake smile. "Mason, what's wrong, honey? Why so tense? Come back and eat, the turkey's getting cold." Her voice was syrupy, but her eyes were sharp, like a warning not to ruin the mood. I didn't reply. Anger and disappointment surged in my chest, but I had no time to argue. Every second that passed was another second Grandpa lay unconscious on the cold porch. I bolted for the door, grabbing my coat and car keys from the hook. Darlene called after me, her voice still sugary. "Mason, where are you going in such a hurry? Come back and eat." But I didn't look back. I jumped into my car, started the engine, and sped off into the cold night. The road from Janesville to Monroe was pitch black, with only my headlights cutting through the misty haze. The air was freezing, my breath forming small clouds on the windshield. I turned on the heater, but the chill in my heart wouldn't fade. The scenery on either side, frost-covered barley fields, wooden houses with faint lights, flashed by like a faded film reel. I pressed the gas harder, the engine's roar blending with the thumping of my heart. My phone buzzed again as I passed a deserted gas station. I glanced at the screen. It was Grandma again. I pulled over to the side of the road, my heart racing, terrified she'd have worse news. "Grandma, I'm on my way, almost there. How's Grandpa doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The ambulance just arrived, Mason." Her voice was faint, still laced with sobs. "They're checking on him. He's still not awake. Please hurry, I'm so scared." "I'm almost there, Grandma." I hung up, my hands shaking so much I nearly dropped the phone. I hit the gas, the car lurching forward, tires screeching on the wet road. The drive to Monroe had never felt so long, Every curve, every hill stretched on endlessly, as if the world was trying to keep me from reaching them. I turned on the radio to ease the tension, but the cheerful holiday music only made me want to smash it. I switched it off, leaving only the heavy silence, broken by the hum of the engine and the pounding of my heart. When I turned onto the road leading to my grandparents' house on the outskirts of Monroe, the red flashing lights of the ambulance pierced the darkness like a beacon of bad news. I parked haphazardly, barely remembering to lock the car, and ran toward the familiar wooden house. The porch steps, where I'd spent hours listening to Grandpa's stories, were now a chaotic scene. 2 paramedics were carefully lifting Grandpa onto a stretcher, his body motionless, eyes closed. He was still dressed impeccably in his suit, his green tie slightly askew as if he'd been preparing to go somewhere. The sight cut into my heart like a knife. Grandma stood on the porch, sobbing into her hands, her thin shawl slipping off her shoulders. I ran to her, kneeling to wrap my arms around her, feeling her tremble in my embrace. "Grandma, I'm here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady to calm her. "Grandpa will be okay, don't be scared, I'm here with you." She clutched my hand, her frail, icy fingers gripping tightly, and whispered, "Mason, I don't know if he'll make it." He kept going in and out, saying he had to wait for them to change their minds. "Change their minds?" I interrupted, my voice breaking. "Change their minds about what, Grandma?" But she just shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. A paramedic signaled to me, his voice low but urgent. "We are taking him to the hospital now. Do you want to come along?" I nodded, helping Grandma to her feet, and we followed them to the ambulance. As the ambulance doors closed, the flashing red lights illuminated Grandma's pale face. I held her hand tightly, trying to offer some warmth, but a storm was brewing inside me. "Change their minds." Those words echoed in my head like a puzzle with no solution. What had caused Grandpa to fall? Why was he dressed neatly in his suit waiting on the cold porch? And why could my dad, his son, sit calmly at a party as if nothing had happened? I looked at Grandma, her eyes filled with sorrow but resolute, and I knew that whatever the answer was, it wouldn't be easy to accept. Inside the ambulance, the cramped space felt suffocating, filled only with the steady wail of the siren and the beeping of medical equipment. Grandpa lay motionless on the stretcher, his face pale under the fluorescent lights. I sat next to Grandma, still holding her hand tightly, feeling her frail fingers tremble. The paramedic in the front was busy checking machines, occasionally turning to ask Grandma about Grandpa's condition. "Does he have any medical history? High blood pressure? Diabetes?" She shook her head, her voice faint. "He's always been healthy. It's just, he's been worrying too much." I looked at Grandma, searching for clues in her eyes, but she only bowed her head, her thin shoulders trembling under her shawl. Worrying too much. Those words sent a chill through me. What was Grandpa worried about? And why did she mention changing their minds? I wanted to ask, to dig deeper into what had happened, but the look in her eyes made me want to hold her tightly, to let her know I was there, that she wouldn't face this alone. Monroe's hospital was small and outdated, with peeling white walls and the sharp smell of antiseptic. We were led to a small waiting room where rows of plastic chairs sat coldly under neon lights. Grandpa was taken to the emergency room, and I only caught a glimpse of him before the glass doors closed, hiding him from view. Grandma sat down, her hands clasped tightly, her lips pressed together as if holding back something. I knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "Grandma, tell me what happened. Why did Grandpa fall, and what's this about changing their minds?" She looked up, her eyes glistening with tears, not the panicked tears from before, but a deep, heavy pain, as if she carried a secret too heavy to bear. She took a deep breath and began, her voice trembling but clear. Darlene didn't want us at Thanksgiving this year. She called me yesterday saying there were too many people, that there wasn't room for us. She told us to stay home to rest and not bother driving. I felt like the blood in my veins stopped flowing. "No room?" I repeated, my voice faltering. You're saying Darlene banned you from coming? I couldn't believe it. My grandparents were family, the ones who had spent their lives loving me and Dad. How could Darlene say something like that? How could she decide who was allowed at Thanksgiving and who wasn't? Grandma nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I tried to reason with your stepmother. I told her we wouldn't be a bother, that we just wanted to see you and your dad like every year. But Darlene wouldn't listen. She said we were too old, that we didn't fit the festive atmosphere at the house, that she'd invited her parents and her relatives, so it was best if we didn't come. I gripped her hands, trying to contain the anger surging in my chest. And what about Dad? What did he say? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. My dad, Greg Ashford, their son, couldn't have gone along with this, could he? Grandma lowered her head, her voice shrinking as if speaking the truth was like stabbing herself in the heart. Your dad. He agreed with Darlene. He told us to stay home to avoid any hassle. He said he'd visit us after the holiday. I sank into a chair, feeling like the world had just crumbled. My dad, the man I'd once thought was strong, my rock, had sided with Darlene to exclude my grandparents from the family holiday? I remembered his cold stare when I asked about them, his curt, "They're busy, they couldn't come." It wasn't true. They weren't busy, they were banned, cast out from the very family they'd built. Grandma continued, her voice choking. Your grandpa was so upset, Mason. He didn't say much, but I could tell. He still put on his suit, picked out his tie, as if he believed your dad would change his mind, would call and say we could come. He kept going in and out to the porch, looking down the road, waiting for a call. I told him to stop waiting, but he said, "Maybe they'll change their minds, Marilyn. Maybe they'll call." Then, he slipped on the stairs, fell, and when I ran out, he was lying there, unconscious. She broke down, covering her face and sobbing. I hugged her, feeling like my heart was shattering. The image of Grandpa in his neat suit standing on the cold porch, waiting for a call that would never come, took my breath away. He'd prepared, he'd hoped, only to be betrayed by his own son. And my dad, the man I'd once respected, had chosen Darlene, her lavish party, over his real family. I tried to comfort her, though my own anger burned fiercely. Grandma, Grandpa will be okay. I'm here with you. We'll get through this. But even as I spoke, I knew my words couldn't ease her pain. I wanted to scream, to drive back to Janesville right then and confront Dad, to ask why he'd treated my grandparents this way. But I couldn't leave Grandma. Couldn't let her sit alone in this cold waiting room. Just then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. It was Dad. My heart pounded, not with hope, but with anger. Grandma saw his name on the screen, a flicker of panic in her eyes. I stood up and stepped to the corner of the room. "I'll talk to Dad for a moment. Stay here. I'll be right back." I answered the call, my voice colder than I thought possible. "Dad, what is it?" I asked, struggling to keep my anger from exploding. He responded, his tone still flat, as if nothing serious was happening. "Mason, where are you? Why'd you leave the party so suddenly? Darlene's really worried." "Worried?" I almost laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. "Dad, Grandpa's in the emergency room. He fell, he's unconscious, while you and Darlene were busy partying. I can't believe you're being so irresponsible." I couldn't hold back, my voice rising, sharp and cold. There was a pause, then Dad replied, his tone irritated. "Mason, don't talk to me like that. I told you Grandpa will be fine. Don't make this more complicated than it is. You're young. You don't understand adult matters." I gripped the phone, feeling like I could crush it. "Young?" I repeated, my voice trembling with rage. "Dad, you and Darlene banned Grandma and Grandpa from Thanksgiving. Darlene told them not to come and you agreed. Did you know Grandpa was waiting for you to change your mind, standing on the cold porch until he fell unconscious? Do you even realize how wrong you are?" Dad's voice hardened, and I could almost smell the beer on his breath through the phone. "Mason, you don't understand family matters. Darlene just wanted things to be neat, no complications. Grandma and Grandpa are old, it's not convenient for them to travel. I said I'd visit them later, didn't I? Visit later? I could barely stay calm. Dad, Grandpa's in the emergency room. You think visiting later is enough? What did they do to deserve this treatment? You're their son. Have you forgotten that? Enough, Mason, Dad snapped, his voice like a slap. Don't talk back to me. I know what I'm doing. Get back here now and don't make things worse. I hung up, my hands shaking so much I nearly dropped the phone. Tears stung my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. I returned to Grandma, who was looking at me with worried eyes. I don't want you fighting with your dad on this day of reunion, she said softly. Go back to the party. The doctors are taking care of your grandpa. I sat beside her, hugging her again. I'm sorry, Grandma, but I can't go back. I'm staying here with you and Grandpa. Dad's wrong and I won't let this go on. She nodded, tears falling again, but this time I saw a spark of resilience in her eyes, as if she was rediscovering a strength she'd long lost. In that cold waiting room, amid the beeping of machines and the sharp smell of antiseptic, I realized that my family had been fractured for a long time, but the painful truth had only just come to light. My grandparents, people who loved me unconditionally, had been betrayed by their own son and pushed aside by my stepmother on the very holiday they cherished. And I, Mason Ashford, would not let them suffer any longer. But what I didn't yet know, what I was about to discover, would make the storm in my heart rage fiercer than ever. Grandma sat beside me, her frail hands clasped tightly, her eyes lost in the distance, as if searching for a distant memory to soothe her pain. The doctor hadn't come out yet, and every minute in that waiting room felt like a century. I glanced at the wall clock, its hands pointed to nearly 10 p.m. But it felt like the world had stopped turning since Grandma's call. A moment later, the phone in Grandma's purse rang. I was about to point it out, but she didn't notice, her gaze still fixed on the emergency room doors. I pulled the phone out and saw a text from my dad on the screen. Curiosity got the better of me and I glanced at it. The message was brief but enough to make my blood boil. Mom, send $200 for this month's electric bill, thanks. I could hardly believe my eyes. My dad, the man who refused to drive to the hospital, who sided with Darlene to ban my grandparents from Thanksgiving, was now texting to ask for money? While Grandpa lay unconscious. I gripped the phone, rage surging like a wildfire, but then it hit me. This wasn't the first time. I opened the message history between Dad and Grandma, knowing I was invading her privacy. The words that appeared stabbed at my heart like knives. Mom, I'm short $500 for car repairs this week. Can you send it? Mom, Tommy's tuition is $1,200 this month. Please send it soon. Mom, the water bill spiked, $150. Thanks. I counted over 50 similar messages stretching back 3 years. Electric bills, water bills, car repairs, property taxes, tuition for Darlene's son, all quietly paid for by my grandparents. I scrolled through the dates and amounts, feeling like my chest was being crushed. My grandparents, with their modest pension and small garden in Monroe, had been financially supporting Dad and Darlene's family for years. Meanwhile, they were treated like outcasts, deemed unworthy of an invitation to Thanksgiving. I set the phone down, my hands trembling with both anger and heartbreak. Grandma looked at me, a flicker of panic in her eyes as she realized what I'd seen. Mason, don't be angry, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Your dad, he's struggling. Darlene said their family's having a hard time, so I help however I can. Help? I lost my composure but quickly reined it in when I saw her flinch. Grandma, Dad's not struggling. He has a stable job and Darlene spends money like water. They buy new cars, go on vacations, throw lavish parties, all with your money. And in return, they don't even invite you to Thanksgiving, don't even call to check on you. Don't you see they're taking advantage of you? Grandma lowered her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. I know, Mason, she said, her voice choking. I know they're not right. But he's my son. I don't want him to suffer. I thought if I helped, the family would be okay. I didn't want your dad to worry. I hugged her tightly. Grandma, Dad doesn't deserve it. He only cares about himself. If he cared about you, he'd be here right now, not sitting at home with Darlene and her relatives. You've done too much already. It's time to stop. Grandma looked up, her eyes a mix of pain and hesitation. But if I stop helping, what will happen to your dad? Darlene said they need money to pay off debts, to buy a new house. I don't want the family to fall apart. I held her hands, keeping my voice gentle but firm. Grandma, the family fell apart when Dad chose Darlene over you. You don't owe him anything. You've given him everything: love, sacrifice, money, but he doesn't appreciate it. And I think it's time he takes responsibility for his own choices. Grandma fell silent, her eyes wavering. I could see her struggling, torn between her love for her son and the harsh truth I'd just laid bare. Finally, she nodded, tears falling, but her voice was steadier. All right, Mason, I'll do as you say. I'm starting to feel tired too. I hugged her tightly, feeling as though I'd lifted a weight off her shoulders, but at the same time a new pain crept into my heart. My dad, the man I'd once admired, had not only turned his back on my grandparents but exploited their love, draining their money to fund Darlene's lavish lifestyle. I'd never felt such disgust for him, but at the same time, I'd never seen so clearly the quiet, selfless love my grandparents had for our family. A moment later, the doctor emerged from the emergency room, interrupting my thoughts. Mrs. Ashford, Mr. Ashford, Henry is stable. He has a fractured rib and a mild head injury, but he's not in critical condition. He's awake now, but needs to stay for observation for a few days. You can visit him now. I let out a sigh of relief, as if a boulder had been lifted from my chest. Grandma burst into tears, but this time they were tears of relief. We walked into the hospital room where Grandpa lay on the bed, his face still pale but his eyes open. He saw me and gave a weak smile. Mason, you came. I knew you would. His voice was hoarse but warm. I took his hand, fighting back tears. Grandpa, I'm sorry. I should have come sooner, should have known what was going on. He shook his head, his frail hand squeezing mine lightly. It's not your fault, Mason. I just wanted to see you and your dad. I thought they'd change their minds. Grandma stood beside him, wiping her tears but staying silent. I knew she was trying to stay calm to keep him from worrying. I sat by his side, sharing light stories about my design work to lift the mood. But in my mind, Dad's messages still haunted me. I knew this wasn't over, that the truth I'd uncovered was just the beginning of a bigger confrontation. In the days that followed, I stayed in Monroe, sleeping on the old sofa in my grandparents' house and helping Grandma care for Grandpa when he was discharged. I checked their bank account, canceled all the automatic payments Dad had set up, and locked the transfer card they'd used to send him money. Each time I hit confirm on the screen, I felt both relief and pain. Relief that my grandparents would no longer be exploited. Pain that I had to do this to protect them from their own son. The days in Monroe passed in a slow, intimate rhythm, heavy with emotion. My grandparents' old wooden house, with the faint scent of pine in the air and the crackling of the fireplace, became a haven where I found peace amid the storm in my heart. Grandpa, though still weak, was starting to sit up. He would often sit by the window, gazing out at the frost-covered barley fields, holding a cup of tea Grandma had brewed and recounting old stories. About his days teaching math. About when my dad was a mischievous kid, always trailing him, begging for stories. I listened, smiling, but every time he mentioned Dad, I felt a deeper cut in my heart. Grandma, meanwhile, was busier than ever, as if caring for Grandpa helped her push aside her pain. She cleaned the house, cooked simple but warm meals, and occasionally brought out a plate of pumpkin pie, even though it wasn't a holiday. I made this for you, Mason, she'd say, her kind smile tinged with sadness in her eyes. I knew she was trying to keep things normal, but the truth we'd just confronted, about Dad, about Darlene, about the years they'd exploited my grandparents, cast a shadow over every moment. About a week after I canceled the automatic payments, Grandma's phone buzzed. I was in the kitchen helping her peel potatoes when the screen lit up with Dad's name. She glanced at the phone, her hands pausing, and I saw her eyes waver, caught between pain and a resolve I'd never seen in her before. "Grandma, let me answer it," I said, reaching for the phone, but she shook her head, her voice soft but firm. "No, Mason. I'll talk to your dad." She pressed the answer button, holding the phone to her ear, and I sat there, my heart pounding, waiting. Dad's voice came through the speaker. Grandma had turned it on as if wanting me to be a witness. "Mom, what's going on?" His tone was sharp, without a hint of concern. "Why haven't this month's bills been paid? Electricity, water, Tommy's tuition, they've all been declined. What did you do to the account?" Grandma took a deep breath, her frail hands gripping the edge of the table. "Greg," she said, her voice calm but cold, the first time I'd ever heard her address Dad by his first name. "We've stopped all the payments. Your father and I can't keep covering your family's expenses anymore. You need to manage on your own." Silence. A long, stifling silence. Then Dad's voice erupted louder, full of anger. "What are you talking about? You can't do that. Our family depends on you. Don't you know Darlene needs that money to prepare for a new house? You're just cutting off your responsibility to the family. Aren't you ashamed?" I clenched my fists, rage flaring in my chest. "Grandma, ashamed? How dare he say that after everything she and Grandpa had done?" I wanted to snatch the phone and yell at him, but Grandma raised her hand to stop me, her eyes sharp and cold. "Greg," she continued, her voice still calm but unyielding, "we've done too much. Your father and I have paid for everything, your house, your cars, tuition. While you didn't even invite us to Thanksgiving, didn't bother to check on your father when he collapsed. You call that family responsibility?" Dad went silent again, but only for a moment. Then Darlene's voice cut in, sugary but calculating. "Mom, don't be upset. Our family needs that money, you know that. Just keep the support going for a few more months and we'll manage on our own. You don't want us to lose our house, do you?" I gritted my teeth, barely containing myself. Darlene dared to mention family after banning my grandparents from the holiday? But Grandma only gave a faint smile, one I'd never seen before, not kind, but resolute. "Darlene, I've said it already. No more support. You figure it out." Then she hung up, cutting them off without another word. I stared at her, stunned. Grandma, the woman who was always soft-hearted, always worried about Dad, had hung up without hesitation. She set the phone down, sighed, and looked at me. "Mason, I was wrong to think helping Greg would keep the family together. I didn't want my son to suffer, but I can't let him keep hurting us anymore." I took her hand, a mix of pride and heartbreak swelling inside me. "Grandma, I'm proud of you, and I promise I'll always be here so you and Grandpa are never alone." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, but this time I saw a lightness in her eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. A few days later, Dad and Darlene showed up at the hospital where Grandpa was having a follow-up visit. I was sitting by his side, reading the newspaper to him when I saw them walk into the hallway. Darlene wore an expensive sweater, her brassy blonde hair meticulously curled, while Dad looked tired but defiant. I stood up, stepping into the hallway to block them before they could enter Grandpa's room. "Dad, Darlene, what are you doing here?" I asked, my voice cold. Dad frowned. "Mason, move aside. I'm here to see Grandpa." But I didn't budge. "See Grandpa? If you really cared how he was, you would have driven here on Thanksgiving night, not waited until now." Darlene cut in, her voice sweet but dripping with feigned offense. "Mason, what's that supposed to mean? Your dad's been busy, don't you understand? Our family has a lot to deal with." I let out a bitter laugh. "Busy? Busy partying with your relatives while Grandpa collapsed waiting for you to change your mind? Darlene, did you know he put on his suit, stood on the cold porch just because you said there was no room for them?" Dad froze, his eyes wavering, but Darlene grabbed his arm, speaking quickly. "Mason, you're misunderstanding. We just wanted things to be organized. Your grandparents are old. It's not convenient for them to travel." I stepped closer, looking straight into her eyes. "Organized? Or did you just not want them embarrassing you in front of your guests? You knew they've been paying for everything. your house, your cars, your son's tuition, and yet you treated them like they were disposable. Dad cut in. That's enough, Mason. You don't get to talk to Darlene like that. But I didn't back down. Dad, I'm not being disrespectful. I'm telling the truth. And the truth is you chose Darlene over your family. You let Grandma and Grandpa get hurt, and I won't let that happen again. Grandma stepped out from the hospital room, her eyes calm but resolute. Greg, she said, her voice soft but sharp, I don't want to see you today. Go home. Dad stood there stunned while Darlene's mouth fell open, as if she couldn't believe Grandma would say such a thing. They lingered for a moment, then turned and left without entering Grandpa's room. As they walked away, I saw Grandma's shoulders straighten, as if she'd just shed a lifelong burden. I stood there watching Dad and Darlene disappear around the corner of the hospital hallway, feeling as though a chapter of my life had just closed. It wasn't the chapter I'd hoped for, a family reunited, gathered together like the old days, but a chapter of harsh, necessary truth. I turned back to Grandma, seeing her stand tall, her eyes still glistening but no longer frail. For the first time, I realized she wasn't just the gentle woman who baked pumpkin pie for me. She was a strong mother ready to face pain to protect herself and Grandpa. I returned to the hospital room where Grandpa lay, his eyes wide open, looking at me with a faint smile. Mason, you did it, he said, his voice hoarse but filled with pride. Your Grandma. She needed you to stand strong. I took his hand, feeling his frail but warm fingers, and smiled. Grandpa, I just want you and Grandma to be happy. I won't let anyone hurt you anymore. He nodded, a spark in his eyes, as if he knew that despite everything changing, we still had each other. In the weeks that followed, Grandpa gradually recovered. The doctors allowed him to be discharged after 10 days of observation, provided he rested completely and avoided strenuous activity. I brought my grandparents back to their wooden house in Monroe, where the scent of barley and pine still lingered in the air. The porch stairs, where Grandpa had fallen, were now fixed by me, the old wooden steps replaced with sturdy new ones. I worked on them one early morning with frost still clinging to the fields while Grandma stood nearby brewing coffee and reminding me to be careful. You're like your grandpa when he was young, she said, her kind smile returning, always wanting everything to be solid. I decided to stay in Monroe longer, not just to care for my grandparents, but because I realized this was where I truly belonged. My apartment in downtown Madison, with its cobblestone streets and city noise, suddenly felt foreign. I called my landlord, informing them I'd be giving up the apartment, and began searching for a small house near my grandparents. It wasn't an easy decision. My freelance design work relied heavily on city connections. But every time I saw Grandma smile or Grandpa sit by the window telling stories, I knew I'd made the right choice. The house I found was just a 10-minute walk from my grandparents', a small wooden home with a white picket fence and a garden big enough for vegetables. I moved in on a frigid winter day, as snow began to fall lightly over Monroe's fields. Grandma helped me clean, bringing a plate of pumpkin pie and a thermos of hot tea. You're nearby now and I feel at ease, she said, her eyes brightening. I was afraid one day you'd leave me too, like your dad. I hugged her, promising I'd never do that. Life in Monroe was slow but meaningful. I took Grandpa to his weekly checkups, helped Grandma fix the porch roof when winter winds blew fiercely, and sometimes sat with her in the kitchen peeling potatoes or baking. Those moments, though simple, were what I cherished most. I realized family wasn't about shared blood, but about those who stayed by your side, loving you unconditionally. My grandparents were my true family, and I would do anything to protect them. Dad didn't call again after that day at the hospital. Darlene sent a few long-winded texts, citing misunderstandings and financial struggle, but I didn't respond. I knew they'd find other ways to sustain their lifestyle, but I also knew my grandparents were no longer their cash source. Once I saw a message from Dad on Grandma's phone, but she glanced at it and deleted it without hesitation. I've given him enough, she said, her voice gentle but firm. Now I just want to live for your grandpa and you." One early winter day, as snow blanketed the fields outside the window, I sat with my grandparents in their living room. The fireplace crackled, and the scent of pumpkin pie filled the air. Grandma sat beside me knitting while Grandpa read an old book, occasionally looking up to tell a joke I'd heard a dozen times. I looked at them, a sense of peace spreading through me as if the pain of the past days had melted away. Grandma set her knitting down, gazing out at the silently falling snow. "I thought I didn't have the courage, Mason," she said softly, her voice reflective. "I spent my whole life worrying about your dad, thinking that was how to hold the family together. But now I feel lighter. You helped me see that sometimes. Letting go is how you love yourself." I took her hand, smiling. "Grandma, I just want you and Grandpa to live the life you deserve. I learned from you that family isn't about duty, it's about appreciation." She nodded, her eyes glistening, but this time with tears of serenity. In the days that followed, I gradually found a new rhythm in Monroe. The small wooden house I rented near my grandparents became the place where I started anew, not just as a grandson, but as a man searching for meaning in life. I once thought Madison, with its bustling streets, coffee shops fragrant with roasted beans, and career opportunities, was where I belonged. But now, amid snow-covered barley fields and the whispering wind through the pines, I realized that true happiness lay in the simple things, in the people who loved me unconditionally. My freelance design work, though initially challenging to transition from Madison to Monroe, unexpectedly flourished in ways I hadn't anticipated. One morning, while I was fixing the porch roof for my grandparents, a neighbor named Walter, an elderly farmer with a warm smile, stopped by, carrying a basket of apples from his orchard. He heard me talk about my design work and asked if I could create a logo for his farm. "I want to sell apples and honey online, but the images out there look awful," he said, scratching his head. "Can you do it, Mason?" I smiled, nodded, and started the small project that evening. The logo I designed for Walter, a stylized apple tree with rustic yet refined lines, unexpectedly gained attention on an online agricultural forum. From there, small orders began pouring in, not just from Monroe but from nearby towns. Farmers, local shop owners, and even a cooperative in Janesville contacted me asking for logos, product packaging, or even websites for their small businesses. They liked my style, simple, authentic, yet with a modern touch. "You understand this place," one client said. "You make things feel like a family home." I began working from my wooden house, turning the living room into a small studio with a drawing table, computer, and sketches scattered everywhere. The work not only sustained me, but brought a sense of fulfillment I'd never found in Madison. In the city, I was always chasing big projects, dealing with demanding clients and tight deadlines. But in Monroe, each design was a story, about a family farm, a small bakery, or a local farmer's market. I felt like I wasn't just working but contributing to the community, to the place I now called home. It was while working on a spring farmer's market in Monroe that I met Clara. She stood behind a stall selling homemade strawberry jam, her brown hair tied high, her eyes sparkling like summer sunlight. Clara was unlike the women I'd met in Madison, always glued to their phones, caught up in flashy stories. She was simple, in a plaid shirt and muddy boots, but her smile had the power to melt any distance. "You're Mason, right?" she asked when I stopped by her stall to take photos for an advertisement. "Walter says you made that amazing apple logo." I smiled, a bit embarrassed. "He's too kind. Did you make this jam yourself?" Clara nodded, handing me a small jar, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. "Grown, picked, and cooked by me. Takes all day, but it's worth it. Try it. You'll love it." I did, and just as she said, the jam was sweet and fragrant, instantly reminding me of Grandma's cooking. "This is amazing," I said, and somehow I lingered at her stall longer than planned, chatting about everything, from jam making to Monroe's farmers markets. Clara grew up on a farm a few miles from Monroe where her family grew strawberries and kept bees. She talked about her childhood, running through fields, learning to make jam from her mother, and how she kept the farm going after her parents retired. I was captivated by her strength, not the showy kind, but a quiet resilience like my grandmother's. Clara wasn't afraid to get muddy in the garden, stay up late cooking jam, or help a neighbor. "Here, people live for each other," she said, her eyes lighting up. "If you help someone, they'll help you back. That's how we live." We started seeing each other more often, not just at the market, but in the afternoons when I'd visit her farm to take photos or design product labels. Clara had a way of making me laugh, even with simple stories about a stray bee or how she burned a batch of jam because she was engrossed in a book. She also had a way of listening, truly listening, when I talked about my grandparents, the Thanksgivings we'd lost, and the rift with my dad. "You're like your grandma," she once said when I told her about canceling Dad's payments. "You're strong, not because you want to be, but because you have to protect the people you love." I don't know when I fell in love with Clara. Maybe it was the afternoon she dragged me to her strawberry fields, teaching me how to pick ripe berries without damaging the plants. Maybe it was the night we sat on a wooden bench at her farm, stargazing and sharing a jar of strawberry jam. Or maybe it was the moment she came to my grandparents' house, bringing a basket of fruit and laughing at Grandpa's old jokes as she listened to his stories. Grandma loved Clara from the first meeting. "That girl's like me when I was young," she said after Clara left. "Kind but strong. Don't let her slip away, Mason." A year later, I proposed to Clara in her strawberry field under a blazing sunset. I didn't have a diamond ring or a grand city-style proposal, just a simple silver ring engraved with a tiny strawberry and a trembling question. "Clara, will you stay with me? Build a family with me?" She looked at me, tears streaming down her face, then nodded, hugging me amidst the fragrant strawberry rose. "You're such an idiot," she laughed, her voice choked with emotion. "But I love your kind of idiot." Our wedding took place on a summer day in Monroe, right in the field behind my grandparents' house. No fancy hotel, no lavish party, just a simple, heartfelt rural celebration. Grandpa, still needing a cane, stood to give a short speech, his voice trembling but proud. "Mason, Clara, you two remind me that family is where the heart belongs," he said. And the crowd, neighbors, friends, Monroe's farmers, cheered loudly. Grandma prepared a feast with roasted chicken, pumpkin pie, and Clara's strawberry jam, all laid out on long wooden tables under maple trees. Clara wore a simple white dress, her hair adorned with wildflowers, radiant like a summer painting. I wore a suit with the green tie Grandpa had chosen for that fateful Thanksgiving, and my heart swelled as she walked toward me hand in hand with her father. Neighbors played music on accordion and violin, lively folk tunes echoing across the field. We danced our first dance under the sunlight amid laughter and applause. Grandma stood beside Grandpa, holding his hand, her eyes sparkling with joy. "I never thought I'd see this day," she whispered to me after the ceremony. "You've given me a new family, Mason." The wedding didn't include Dad or Darlene. I didn't invite them, and they hadn't reached out since the hospital. But I didn't feel their absence. The people there, my grandparents, Clara, the neighbors who'd become family, filled my heart completely. As I looked at Clara beaming in the field, I knew I'd found not just love, but a true home. My work continued to grow. I opened a small design studio in Monroe, specializing in projects for local businesses. Logos, packaging, websites. Each project was a story, and I was proud to tell them. Clara joined in, helping manage orders and bringing her jam to markets across the region. We became a team, not just in work but in life. One evening, as Clara and I sat by the fireplace in my grandparents' house, Grandma brought out a plate of pumpkin pie, just like old times. Grandpa told a story from his youth. Clara laughed heartily, and I looked at them, realizing that family isn't just the people you choose. It's the ones who choose to stay by your side no matter what. I held Clara's hand, feeling her warmth, and knew that this journey, though it began in pain, had led me to a new, complete family. As I sat there watching my loved ones gathered, I thought about my journey, From a naive boy in Janesville to a lost young man in Madison to a man who found meaning in the simplest things. I once thought filial piety meant never defying your parents, doing everything to keep the peace. But after all this, I understood that true filial piety sometimes means saying no. No to exploitation, no to hurt, and no to those who don't value your love. I stood up, grabbed a plate of pumpkin pie from the kitchen and cut a large slice for Grandpa. He laughed, adjusting an imaginary tie around his neck, a beloved old habit. "You cut it so big, how's an old man supposed to eat this?" he teased, but took a small bite anyway. Grandma smiled, and I smiled too, feeling like the world had shrunk to just the three of us in that warm wooden house amid a cold winter. My story closes not with regret, but with a lesson etched deep in my heart. Some people will never change, but you can choose to keep enduring or to protect those who deserve it. I chose my grandparents, their quiet love given selflessly their whole lives. I chose Clara, the simple rural girl, not flashy but radiant in her own way. And in those snowy winter days, I knew that my new family, small but whole, would always be my home. Thank you for listening to my story. I wish you'll soon find where your heart belongs. And if you've already found it, don't let it slip away. Stand strong to protect the values you cherish.